Yoga instructors are always telling you to find your happy place. They make it sound like it's a hidden cove you can just stumble upon, a mental construct of a beach or a quiet forest. My happy place wasn't mental, and it wasn't a construct. It was 100% physical, cost me $120 on Amazon, and was currently suspended 3 feet off the ground between two magnificent 80-year-old oak trees. I'm talking, of course, about the hammock. It wasn't just a hammock, it was the hammock. A Mayan weave, double-wide, high-end masterpiece of woven cotton. It was a glorious, over-the-top explosion of sunset colors, bright orange, deep blue, and a yellow so vibrant it probably violated some local ordinance, which, as it turned out, wasn't far from the truth. My name is Mark. I'm a graphic designer, which is a fancy way of saying I spend 10 hours a day staring at a 32-inch monitor, arguing with clients over whether a shade of blue looks more trustworthy than a slightly different shade of blue. My optic nerves are fried. My brain is a puddle of RGB codes. The hammock was my escape pod. It was my decompression chamber. Lying back, I could hear the gentle creak of the ropes, a sound far more soothing than any white noise machine. The whisper of the wind through the massive oak leaves, the smell of freshly cut grass from 3 yards over. It was a symphony of suburbia, and I was its blissed-out conductor. My wife, Sarah, appeared at the edge of the patio, holding up a cold beer. She's an architect, a woman who understands angles and load-bearing structures, and she looked at my somewhat slapdash hammock setup with a mixture of professional skepticism and marital amusement. "You're not moving from that spot, are you?" she called, her voice laughing. I wriggled, the hammock conforming to my body like a memory foam cloud. "Only if the house burns down," I called back. And even then, I'd need to see a 10-day forecast before I commit. It's supposed to be 74 and partly cloudy all week. "Well, Your Highness," she said, walking over and handing me the bottle. "Don't get too comfortable. Your kingdom has a visitor." I was about to ask what she meant when a shadow fell across me, blocking the perfect, dappled sunlight. This shadow was cold. It smelled faintly of lavender-scented Windex and petty tyranny. "Good afternoon, Mark." I sat up. Fast. Too fast. The beer sloshed, the hammock spun 45 degrees, and I nearly dumped myself onto the lawn. I was face to face with my neighbor. My nemesis. The newly elected, iron-fisted president of the Maplewood Homeowners Association, Brenda. Brenda didn't knock. Brenda didn't call. Brenda materialized. She was standing on the precise, laser-surveyed property line. A vision in beige. Beige visor, beige polo shirt with the Maplewood HOA logo embroidered on it, beige walking shorts, and beige sneakers. The only color on her was the blood-red clipboard she held clutched to her chest. It was, I had long ago decided, her scepter. "Brenda," I said, trying to untangle my legs from the hammock's embrace. I felt like a marlin caught in a very relaxing net. "Hi, what's up?" "Good afternoon, Mark," she repeated, her voice a perfect, high-pitched whine. It was the voice of a person who has, on multiple occasions, demanded to see the manager of a fast food restaurant. "You're enjoying yourself?" The way she said enjoying made it sound like I was skinning a puppy. "I am," I said, finally planting 2 feet on the ground, though I was still technically in the hammock. "It's a nice day." "Yes, it is." She made a tut sound. "We're trying to maintain a certain aesthetic in this community, Mark. A level of decorum." I looked from my well-maintained lawn to my lovely painted-within-the-lines house. I think I'm contributing to the decorum. I'm decorating. With a hammock. Brenda inhaled sharply, her nostrils flaring. It's bright, and it's hanging. It gives the neighborhood a bohemian feel. I almost laughed. Brenda, it's a hammock. I think the Mayans who invented it would be surprised to hear it's bohemian. They were more into building pyramids and, astrophysics. It's a scientifically proven relaxation device. She was not amused. Her pencil, which seemed to be attached to her clipboard by a tiny beige coiled cord, was already moving. She made a check mark. It was an aggressive stabbing motion. It's a temporary structure, Mark, and it's unapproved. You'll be hearing from the board. Brenda, I pleaded, trying one last time. It's not a structure. It's fabric. I can take it down in 2 minutes. See? I started to unhook one end. That's just it, she said, her eyes narrowing. It's temporary. That's what makes it so untidy. It implies a transience. She turned, her beige sneakers pivoting on my lawn, and marched back to her own identical house. Sarah was standing at the screen door. Well, that looked tense. I think I just got cited by the beige police, I said, slumping back into the hammock. The beer was warm. The vibe was ruined. Paradise, it seemed, was lost. 2 days later, the beige envelope arrived. It didn't just show up in the mail. It was placed in my mailbox, presumably by hand, like a summons. The return address was just Maplewood HOA, with the ominous P.O. box that I paid $400 a year to. I opened it in the kitchen. Sarah was leaning against the counter, sipping coffee and trying to look sympathetic. It was a single, glorious page of bureaucratic nonsense. Official notice of violation. Date, October 12, 2025. To Mark T. Peterson, owner, 124 Oak Street. From Maplewood HOA Board of Directors. Violation. This letter serves as official notice that your property is in violation of the Maplewood Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CC&Rs. Article 4, Section 2.b. Unapproved outdoor furniture and temporary structures. Description. The board has observed one unapproved, multicolored hanging fabric lounge, hammock, suspended between two trees on the front-facing property. Hanging fabric lounge? I sputtered, reading it aloud. She makes it sound like I strung up a dirty mattress. It's a hammock. They have them at Pottery Barn, for crying out loud. I continued reading. Remedy. The hanging fabric lounge must be removed from public view immediately. Deadline. You have 48 hours from the date of this notice to cure the violation. Penalty. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50 per day to be assessed against your property until the violation is cured. $50 a day, I yelled, waving the paper. For a hammock, that's highway robbery. Mark, just take it down, Sarah said gently. It's not worth it. You can put it up when you're using it and take it down when you're done. She'll never know. I looked at the letter again. I looked at the smug serif font. I pictured Brenda's little pencil-stabbing motion. It wasn't about the hammock anymore. It wasn't even about the $50. It was about the principle. It was about the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of calling a hammock a hanging fabric lounge. You're right, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Sarah's eyes widened. She recognized this tone. This was the tone I used before I bought a 3D printer to save money on board game miniatures, and ended up spending $2,000 on plastic resin. Mark, she said warningly. You're right, I repeated. It's not worth fighting. I stared at the letter, a dangerous, beautiful, and utterly idiotic glint appearing in my eye. It's worth interpreting. Against the advice of my wife, my lawyer, who I called and who laughed at me for 10 minutes, and my own better judgment, I decided to appeal. I was a reasonable man. The board was made up of reasonable people. Or so I told myself. I requested a special hearing. It was granted for 7:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. The location? Brenda's garage. I prepared. Oh, how I prepared. I put my graphic design skills to work. I created a 12-page full-color presentation titled The Historical, Ergonomic, and Aesthetic Benefits of the Hammock. I had charts. I had diagrams. I had historical woodcuts of 18th century gentlemen lounging in hammocks. I had a slide with a link to a New England Journal of Medicine study on the benefits of suspension for lumbar health. I was armed with facts, logic, and a laser pointer. I walked into Brenda's garage. It was, as expected, uncomfortably neat. The walls were lined with pegboard, where every tool was not just hung, but had its outline drawn in black marker. It smelled of Windex and lost hopes. Brenda sat at a folding table, flanked by the other 2 board members, Stan and Mort. I called them the twins. They were 2 elderly men, perpetually in identical golf shirts, who hadn't had an original thought since the Nixon administration. Their only job was to second Brenda's motions and vote aye. "Mark," Brenda said, not looking up from her notes. "You have 5 minutes?" "Thank you, members of the board," I said, setting up my laptop. "I've prepared a brief presentation." I clicked to the first slide. The Hammock, a brief history. "We know what a hammock is, Mark," Brenda cut in. "Do you?" I countered, a little sharper than I intended. "Because the violation notice called it a hanging fabric lounge, which I must argue is both pejorative and inaccurate." Mort coughed. Stan just stared at his own hands. "I'm here to appeal to your reason," I continued, clicking through my slides. "This bylaw, Article 4, Section 2.b, is clearly intended to prevent, I don't know, people setting up camping tents on their lawn, or bouncy castles, or God forbid a sofa. My hammock is tasteful, it's removable, it's good for my lumbar, as you can see from this study. It's not a temporary structure any more than a bird bath is." I finished with my closing argument. "All I'm asking for is a simple variance, a hammock pass, if you will. It's quiet, it's clean, and it makes me a happier, more relaxed neighbor." I smiled, confident in my logical victory. Brenda leaned forward, the fluorescent garage light glinting off her visor. "Mark," she said, her voice dripping with faux patience, "the bylaws are not suggestions. They are rules. We can't grant a variance for one person's fabric lounge without opening the floodgates. A hammock is a temporary structure. It's a gateway. Today it's a hammock. Tomorrow it's a wind chime emporium. Then what? People painting their mailboxes? People putting up pinwheels?" I looked at Stan and Mort. They were nodding, as if pinwheels were the final apocalyptic step before society collapsed. "The bylaws are clear," Brenda said, closing her binder with a sharp thud. "It's ugly, it's temporary, and it's unapproved. Appeal denied. But denied, Mark. You have 24 hours to remove it, or the fines begin. That will be all." I stood there, my laptop open to a slide about spinal alignment. I packed up my laser pointer in silence. I walked out of the garage and into the cool night air. Defeated. But defeat, I've found, is just a different kind of fuel. Reason had failed. It was time for something else. I didn't sleep. I was fueled by two things: the 2-for-1 espresso deal at the grocery store and pure, unadulterated 200-proof spite. Sarah found me in my home office at 2:00 a.m., surrounded by a blizzard of paper. "Mark, honey, what are you doing?" "I'm reading," I growled, not looking up. "Reading what? The dictionary?" "The CC&Rs," I said, holding up the massive 212-page document I'd printed out. "The covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Our neighborhood's Bible. I'm going to find it, Sarah. I'm going to find the crack." "The crack?" "Mark, you sound insane. Just go to bed." "No." I slammed my hand on the desk, rattling a tower of empty coffee mugs. She said, "The bylaws are clear." But they're not clear. They're 212 pages of badly written, contradictory, legalese nonsense. And somewhere in this novel is our salvation. She sighed, the long-suffering sigh of a woman married to a man who gets projects. "Okay. Well, don't forget to footnote your rage. I'm going to bed." I dove back in. It was a journey into the heart of suburban darkness. Article 3. Acceptable exterior color palettes. All 15 shades of beige were listed, including Satan's beige and ecstatic taupe. Article 5. Pet restrictions. No animal over 40 pounds. No animal that barks excessively, which was defined as any barking. Article 9. Holiday decorations. May be erected no earlier than 14 days before the holiday and must be removed no later than 48 hours after. Wreaths may not exceed 24 inches in diameter. It was madness. I was highlighting, cross-referencing, and muttering to myself. My desk was covered in yellow, pink, and blue lines. And then I found it. I found Article 4, Section 2.b. My enemy. The Unapproved Outdoor Furniture and Temporary Structures Clause. It was ironclad. It banned any furniture not part of a pre-approved patio set, and any structure, temporary or otherwise, including but not limited to tents, sheds, canopies, and hanging fabric lounges, hammocks. They had actually added the word hammock in a 2019 addendum. Brenda had been playing the long game. I slumped. It was over. She had won. But wait. My eyes drifted to the next page. A different section. A completely different article. Article 7. Athletic and Recreational Equipment. I read it once. I read it twice. I read it aloud to the empty room, my voice trembling. Permanent or semi-permanent athletic equipment, e.g. basketball hoops, swing sets, jungle gyms, climbing structures, is permitted, provided it is installed professionally, meets all city safety codes, and does not exceed 15 feet in height. All such equipment must be submitted to the board for approval. Wait, no. That was the old version. I was looking at an amended page. I flipped to the 2022 addendum. The new Article 7 was simpler. It had been rewritten after someone's kid got hurt, and the HOA got scared of liability. The new version read, "Any and all athletic or recreational equipment is permitted by right, provided it is installed professionally, carries its own liability insurance, meets all city safety codes, and does not exceed 15 feet in height." By right. That meant Brenda couldn't say no. A slow, maniacal smile spread across my face. Article 4 banned furniture and temporary structures. Article 7 allowed permanent athletic equipment. They banned my hanging fabric lounge, but they said nothing about a suspended athletic training apparatus. The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was huge, it was stupid, it was expensive, and it was perfectly, beautifully, 100% legal. The next morning, I was a man transformed. I was no longer a defeated Hammock owner. I was a man with a mission. Sarah watched me, concerned, as I mainlined a pot of coffee and typed furiously into Google. "What are you doing now?" she asked. "Research," I said. My search history was eclectic. Professional-grade safety netting. Circus equipment installers near me. High ropes course builders residential. Buy Trapeze net. "Mark," Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. "No, absolutely not." "It's athletic equipment, Sarah," I said, spinning in my chair. "It's for my core, my agility, my aerial meditation. You get winded walking up the stairs. This will help with that." I found a company. The logo was a muscular arm gripping a grappling hook over a mountain. The name was Apex Adventure Builds. They specialized in commercial zip lines, rock climbing walls, and, yes, custom suspended netting solutions. I dialed the number. A voice on the other end answered, so loud it almost blew out my phone's speaker. "Apex Builds. Stage." Hi," I said, intimidated. "My name is Mark. I have a unique residential installation query." "Yeah? What did she do?" I blinked. "Who?" "The HOA," Stig boomed. "You got the voice. The my neighbor is a tyrant and I just read the bylaws voice. I get 'em all the time. What did they ban, kid? A birdhouse? A tastefully painted rock? A non-beige mailbox?" I was in love. "A hammock," I said, my voice full of reverence. "A hammock? That's a classic. That's a gateway violation. What did they call it? A fabric nuisance?" "Hanging fabric lounge," I whispered. Stig let out a roar of laughter that sounded like a bear gargling. "Oh, that's a good one. That's prime. So what are we building to replace it? A trebuchet? I did a trebuchet last month. We launched watermelons into a retention pond for a week. It was beautiful." "No, I was thinking a net, a big one, suspended between my 2 oak trees." "A safety net?" "Like a trapeze safety net. A high-impact, triple-braided nylon trapeze net. Something that could, hold, say, 1,000 pounds for athletics." There was a long, beautiful pause on the other end of the line. "You got a problem with your HOA, kid?" "You have no idea?" "I live for these jobs," Stig said, his voice full of glee. "This is gonna be art. I'll be there tomorrow for the consultation. And Mark, measure the distance between those trees. We're gonna go big." The next day at 8:00 a.m., a truck pulled up. This wasn't a truck. This was a beast. A Ford F-350. Dually, matte black, lifted so high you'd need a stepladder to get in. It had winches, it had smokestacks, it didn't park at my curb, it made landfall. The man who emerged was, if possible, larger than his vehicle. He was a mountain of a man, with a beard that looked like it had its own ecosystem, and a Carhartt jacket that had seen things. "Mark?" he sopped, boomed. "Stig?" I squeaked. He marched onto my lawn, ignoring the sidewalk, and slapped one of the oak trees. The thud was audible from my porch. "Good bones," he said, nodding in approval. 80, 100 years old. These'll hold." He pulled out a laser measure and a notepad. "So, hanging fabric lounge, huh? She's gonna hate this." We stood in the yard, two generals planning a campaign. "What's the span?" Stig asked. 31 feet, trunk to trunk, I said. "And the property line?" "Right there," I pointed. "Brenda's house is the beige one, the one with the windows that look like they're judging me." "Perfect," Stig grinned. "We'll orient it for maximum visibility. So, 20-foot by 30-foot net. That sound good?" "Is that big?" "It's statement-sized," Stig corrected. "We'll use high-impact triple-braided nylon, rated for 5,000 pounds. You could park a car on this thing, or, do some light stretching. It'll be suspended by industrial-grade, tree-safe, but very visible half-inch steel cabling." My heart was pounding. What color does it come in?" Stig's grin widened, revealing a gold tooth. "That's the best part. Our stock safety color is hyper-visible blue. It's a blue so bright, it vibrates." "The brighter the better, Stig," I said, my voice firm. "My man," he said, slapping me on the back, nearly sending me through the porch window. "And it'll need an access ladder. A rope ladder. For, access. That okay?" "Yes," I said. "Access equipment is a great addition." "All right. I'll write up the specs. You just need two things from me. First, my professional spec sheet. It'll list this as a custom athletic training structure, fully compliant with ASTM safety standards. Second, a certificate of liability insurance for $2 million. You take those to City Hall. Get your permit. They can't stop you." "What about the HOA? Article 7 says, by right, professionally installed, insured, and meets city codes." "With my paperwork, you'll have all four. She can't do a damn thing. This," he said, puffing out his chest, "is what we call full compliance. It's the most beautiful, expensive way to tell someone to screw themselves." An hour later, I was at the city planning office. It was a gray, soul-sucking place that smelled like stale coffee and toner. I got in line, clutching Stig's professional, laminated folder. The clerk, a woman named Jan, who looked like she'd been chewing the same piece of gum since 1994, finally called me. "Next." "Hi," I said, sliding the folder through the opening. "I'd like to file for a residential installation permit, please." She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the specs. She stopped. She read it again. She looked up, the gum-chewing ceasing for a moment. Custom athletic training structure?" "Yes," I said confidently. "For aerial acrobatics?" "It's a hobby," I said, trying to look athletic. "For my core." She looked at me. She looked at my polo shirt and my khakis. She looked at the specs again. "It's a 600-square-foot net? Suspended 10 feet in the air?" "It's an elevated athletic safety structure," I corrected, using Stig's terminology. "All the specs from the licensed installer are right there, along with the insurance certificate. Setbacks are all clear." Jan sighed, a deep, world-weary sigh. She'd seen it all. "You one of them circus people?" "Just a hobbyist," I said. She shrugged. "No city ordinance against it. As long as the setbacks are clear and the installer is insured, fine." Weirdo. She picked up a heavy rubber stamp, a thud that echoed in my heart. Approved. "Here's your permit. $50, and you have to post it in your front window during all phases of construction." "Oh, I will," I said, handing her my credit card. "I absolutely will." I drove home, the permit on the passenger seat like a holy relic. I went to a copy shop and made 3 high-visibility, 1117 copies. I laminated them. I taped one to my front window, facing out. I taped one to the mailbox. and I taped one to the condemned hammock, which I left in a sad, defiant pile on my lawn. The big day arrived. Thursday, 7:00 a.m. Stig didn't just show up. He invaded. It started with a low rumble. 2 massive Apex Adventure Builds trucks, plus a third truck towing a small cherry picker, rolled onto our quiet suburban street. Doors slammed. 3 men, all of whom looked like they'd just stepped off the set of Axemen, started unloading equipment. The noise was immediate, and it was glorious. There was the clang of metal poles hitting the asphalt, the weight HIR of industrial-grade drills being tested, the shouting of the crew. "Tensioner! Get me the half-inch ratchet! No, the big one!" I was on my porch, mug of coffee in hand, like a king surveying his domain. Sarah was peeking through the blinds, shaking her head, but I could see her shoulders shaking with laughter. "It's so much," she whispered, coming out to join me. "It's a statement-sized, Sarah," I said. "Art." The first sign of the enemy was a twitch in the curtains of the beige house across the street. A minute later, the front door flew open. Brenda stormed across her lawn, already yelling. She was in a pink bathrobe and slippers, her clipboard conspicuously absent, which meant this was an unofficial, panic-driven attack. "Mark! Mark Peterson! What is this? Cease and desist! Cease this racket! It's 7 in the morning!" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Morning, Brenda. Beautiful day for a construction project, isn't it?" Stig, who had been waiting for this moment, sauntered over. "Ma'am, we're Apex Adventure Builds, fully licensed and insured. We're on the clock." "I don't care who you are. You are violating everything. Mark, I gave you 48 hours. Your time is up. You're building an illegal structure." "Oh, this?" I said, feigning confusion. "This isn't the hammock. That's long gone. See?" I pointed to the sad, colorful puddle on the lawn. "This is a new project. A totally different project." "It's a trampoline," she shrieked. "Those are banned. Article 5, Section 8. "Nope," I said, smiling. "Not a trampoline. This is athletic and recreational equipment. It's explicitly allowed. Article 7. You should know it. You're the president." I pointed to the permit taped to my window. Brenda had to walk onto my pathway to read it. I watched her squint. I watched her read the words, "Custom Athletic Training Structure." I watched her read the word, "Approved." Her face went through a truly spectacular range of colors. It started at a pale, shocked white. It moved to a confused, blotchy red. It finally settled on a deep, vibrating, apoplectic purple. You can't," she sputtered. "He can," Stig said, his voice cheerful. "We're insured. We're professional. We're under the 15-foot height limit. And we're meeting all city codes. We are, in fact, the most compliant installation this neighborhood has ever seen." But, Brenda was at a loss. She was a creature of rules, and I had followed them, just in a way her brain couldn't process. "It's blue." "Yes, it is," I said. "Hyper-visible blue, I believe, for safety." I'm calling the board," she stammered, turning and retreating, her pink slippers flapping in defeat. "You are the board," I called after her, but she was already gone, slamming her front door so hard I thought a window might break. Stig gave me a slow, appreciative wink. She's a feisty one. "All right, boys, let's make this thing extra secure. Double bolt the tensioners, and let's test those cables. I want to hear 'em sing." For the next 4 hours, The neighborhood was filled with the glorious thwang, thwang, thwang of industrial-grade steel cables being ratcheted to drum-like tightness. It was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. The crew worked with terrifying efficiency. They climbed the trees. They set the anchors. They used the cherry picker to unfurl the net. And when it was unfurled, oh, it was magnificent. It was enormous. A vast 600-square-foot rectangle of the most obnoxious, offensive, and glorious blue imaginable. It blotted out the sun. It dominated the landscape. It was a monument to spite. Stig's crew packed up. "She's all yours, kid," Stig said, handing me a small laminated card with safety instructions, which I promptly pocketed for the binder. "She'll stretch a bit, but she'll hold. Give her hell." He and his crew got in their monster trucks and rumbled away, leaving behind a new, blue-tinted reality. The street was quiet. Too quiet. The dust from Stig's trucks settled. And then the neighbors came out. They'd been watching from their windows, of course, but now, with the construction, or de-escalation, as I thought of it, over, they drifted out. First was Gary, from 3 doors down. Gary's a nice guy, but his defining characteristic is confused. He just stared. He walked a full circle around my front yard, his head tilted. Finally, he spoke. "Dude," he said, which is how he starts every sentence. "Dude? Why?" I was prepared for this. "It's for my core, Gary. My aerial agility. It's a net, man." "It's an elevated athletic safety structure," I recited. "So, you're gonna jump? In it?" "I'm going to train," I said mysteriously. "It's a whole new regimen." Gary just nodded slowly. "Okay, cool, cool. It's really blue, man." "Safety first, Gary." He wandered off, satisfied that I was insane, but harmlessly so. Sarah came out onto the porch, her arms crossed. She too just stared at it. It was, I had to admit, a lot. It cast a hyper-visible blue shadow over the entire lawn. "It's bigger than I expected," she said. "That's what Stig said," I replied, beaming. "You've lost your mind," she said, but she was smiling. "I'm going to be the trapeze guy's wife forever, aren't I? The mailman is going to have questions." "He'll be jealous," I said. "Mark, what are you really going to do with this?" I looked her dead in the eye, my face a mask of serious conviction. "It's the principle, Sarah. You can take my hanging fabric lounge, but you will never take my right to elevated athletic recreation. It's the American dream, with a rope ladder." She burst out laughing. "You are an idiot, a complete, unmanageable, legislative loophole-finding idiot. And you love me for it." "I'm getting there," she said. "Now, are you going to, train?" "I am," I said. "I am." I grabbed the brand-new rope ladder. It was time to christen the beast. The street was silent. The other neighbors had retreated. Even Brenda's curtains were still. The stage was set. I grabbed the thick, knotty rope of the access ladder. I'd seen Stig's guys go up it like squirrels. How hard could it be? Answer: very. I'm a graphic designer. My primary muscle group is in my scrolling finger. I got my right foot into the first loop and just dangled. My left foot flailed, kicking at the air. I grunted. "It's a high-resistance ladder." "Use your core," Sarah called from the porch, filming this with her phone. I could hear her barely suppressed giggles. I ignored her, and with a move that was less American Ninja Warrior and more beached walrus, I heaved myself up. I scrambled, I flopped, I grunted. And finally, after what felt like 10 minutes, I rolled, gasping, onto the net. And it was awesome. It wasn't soft. It wasn't cozy like the hammock. It was empowering. It was bouncy. I was 10 feet in the air. I could see everything. I could see the roof of Gary's Prius. I could see the bald spot on the head of the mailman 2 streets over. And most importantly, I could see directly into Brenda's pristine, sterile, HOA-approved rose garden. I lay back. The hyper-visible blue mesh created a crosshatch pattern on the afternoon sun. I felt victorious. This wasn't just a net. It was a 600-square-foot monument to a loophole. "How is it?" Sarah called up. "It's athletic," I yelled back. Now for the workout. Brenda was watching. I knew she was watching. The twitch in her curtain was back. I had to perform. I steeled myself. I took a deep breath. And I did. One single, pathetic, half-formed sit-up. "Ah!" I yelled for effect. "Feel the burn! The sweet, sweet burn of athletics!" I then collapsed back onto the net, panting. That was enough exercise for one day. From the back of my shirt, where I had stashed them during my ungraceful ascent, I pulled 2 items, a paperback novel I'd been meaning to read, and a small, travel-sized pillow. I fluffed the pillow, placed it behind my head, opened my book, and began to read. I was, in every sense of the word, lounging on my athletic equipment. I could feel the heat of Brenda's rage stare from across the street. I turned a page. I wiggled my toes. I was, for the first time in a week, completely and totally relaxed. It was the most satisfying, spite-fueled relaxation I had ever experienced. I must have been up there for a solid hour. The sun was warm. The breeze was nice. I was actually getting into my book. It was, in its own ridiculous way, paradise. And then I heard the shriek. It was a sound that didn't belong in our quiet neighborhood. It was a high-pitched, animalistic sound of pure, concentrated rage. "He's just lying on it! He's just reading a book! That's not athletic! That's loitering! I'm calling the police!" I bookmarked my page. Showtime. I sat up. Across the street, Brenda was on her front lawn, phone clutched to her ear. She was actually calling 911. "Yes, an officer, immediately! My neighbor, he's built an illegal circus structure. And he's taunting me." I sighed. I had really hoped it wouldn't come to this. No, wait, that's a lie. I had desperately hoped it would come to this. I stayed on the net. I wasn't going to make it easy. I wanted the full effect when the authorities arrived. 5 minutes later, a squad car rolled slowly down our street. It didn't just drive. It cruised, the way cops do when they get a call that has a 99% chance of being complete nonsense. The car pulled up, right between my house and Brenda's. Not one, but 2 officers got out. One was the veteran. You could tell. He had the "I've seen it all, and I'm tired of all of it" mustache. His name tag read Davis. The other was a rookie. He looked about 19 and was trying to look serious, but his eyes were as wide as saucers. His name tag read Miller. Davis looked at Brenda, who was gesticulating wildly. He looked at my house. And then he looked up. And he saw me. I was sitting cross-legged on a giant, bright blue net, 10 feet in the air, holding a Stephen King novel. I gave them a polite, friendly wave. Davis just stared. He put his hand on his radio. He took it off. He put it back on. He looked at his partner. Miller was very, very busy inspecting a crack in the sidewalk, trying not to laugh. "Okay," Davis said, his voice a gravel pit of exhaustion. He looked at his notepad. Dispatch said, "Illegal circus structure?" Brenda ran over, her pink bathrobe flapping. "Officers! Thank God! Thank God you're here!" "Ma'am, what is the nature of the emergency?" Davis asked. "Him!" she shrieked, pointing at me. "That man, Mark Peterson, he's built this thing in violation of all HOA rules. It's a terrible eyesore. It's a nuisance, and he's taunting me." Officer Davis looked up at me. I looked down at him. "Sir," Davis called out, his voice heavy. "We're, gonna need you to come down from the net." "No problem, officer," I called back cheerfully. "Just give me a minute. It's a high-resistance ladder. Very athletic." I proceeded to make my way back down the ladder, with all the grace of a sack of potatoes falling out of a tree. I flopped onto the grass at their feet. "Mark Peterson?" Davis asked. "That's me," I said, brushing myself off. "Ma'am," Davis said, turning to Brenda, "this appears to be on his property." "It's illegal," Brenda insisted. It's not athletic. He's napping and reading. You can't read on athletic equipment. That's not what it's for. Arrest him." Officer Miller finally broke. He turned away, pretending to cough, but his shoulders were shaking. "Ma'am," Davis said, pinching the bridge of his nose, We don't arrest people for improper use of athletic equipment. That's not a thing." "Well, it's a code violation." "Then you should call code enforcement," Davis said. "I am code enforcement," Brenda yelled, pointing to her HOA polo, which she had apparently put on over her bathrobe. This was getting good. But it was time for the pièce de résistance. "Officers," I said, holding up a hand. "I understand the confusion. I really do. It's a unique piece of equipment. But I assure you everything is 100% legal. If you'll just give me one moment." I walked over to my front porch. I returned, not empty-handed. I was holding a white 3-inch 3-ring binder. On the spine, in a very clear, bold, sans serif font, I had printed a label. It read, "The Binder of Justice." I opened the binder. Officer Davis sighed. This was not his first binder rodeo. "Officers," I said, in my most professional presentation voice. "Good afternoon. I understand the confusion, and I apologize for this spectacle." I did not apologize for the spectacle. I am, however, fully within my rights, as outlined by both city and association law. I flipped to the first tab. Tab A, City Permits. "Here," I said, tapping the clear, plastic-sleeved page, "is the city-issued permit, stamped and approved by Jan at the planning office. As you can see, it's for a custom, athletic training structure. Note the approved stamp. All fees paid." Officer Miller leaned in. "It's all in order. Laminated." "Of course," I said. Brenda was sputtering. But, the bylaws." "Ah, yes," I said, flipping to tab B, HOA CCNRs. "Let's review, shall we? Here, on page 84, is Article 4, Section 2 Pot B. This is the unapproved outdoor furniture clause that, as you'll note in this addendum, I tapped a highlighted line, bans hanging fabric lounges, aka hammocks. This is the article I believe my neighbor is confused about. My hammock is gone. I am in full compliance with Article 4. I flipped to the next page. However, if you'll turn your attention to tab C, the loophole, I mean Article 7, athletic and recreational equipment. As you can see from the 2022 addendum, any such equipment is permitted by right. That's the key phrase, officer. By right, provided it meets 4 conditions. I held up my fingers, counting them off. 1. Professionally installed. Please see tab D, Apex Adventure Builds. Here is their license and a signed, notarized affidavit of professional installation from their owner, Stig. 2. Carries its own liability insurance. Please see tab E, Certificate of Insurance. A $2 million policy, naming the HOA as an additional insured. They got the copy in the mail this morning. Brenda's eye twitched. 3. Meets all city safety codes. See again, tab D and tab A. And 4. Does not exceed 15 feet in height. Officer, I said, pointing up. I have the spec sheet here. That net is suspended at exactly 14.5 feet, well under the limit. I closed the binder with a satisfying thwump. As you can see, officers, I am not in violation. I am, in fact, probably the most compliant resident in this entire neighborhood. I am just a man on his own property, enjoying his elevated athletic training structure in a passive manner. I believe that's my right. There was a long, long silence. Brenda looked like her brain had blue-screened. But he's lounging. You can't lounge by right, but... Officer Davis looked at Brenda. He looked at me. He looked at the giant blue net. He looked at the binder of justice. He sighed, the sigh of a man who is 2 years from retirement and just wants to go home. Ma'am, he said to Brenda, enforcing naps is not our jurisdiction. Enforcing the type of athletics is not our jurisdiction. As far as I can tell, no laws are being broken. He turned to me. Sir, you have a very comprehensive binder. Thank you, officer. I'm a graphic designer. Ma'am, he said, turning back to Brenda, this is a civil matter. Between you, this binder, and the HOA. Do not call 911 again, unless there is an actual emergency. Good day. But... Good day, ma'am. Officer Davis and Officer Miller got back in their car. As they pulled away, I could see Officer Miller, no longer able to hide it, absolutely howling with laughter, his head thrown back. Brenda was left on the sidewalk, sputtering, utterly and completely defeated. I picked up the binder of justice. I gave her a polite 2-finger wave. Have a great day, Brenda. And as she watched, speechless, I climbed back up my rope ladder, flopped onto my net, and reopened my book. The story, as you can imagine, spread like wildfire. The showdown at the Blue Net became an instant neighborhood legend. The cops had been called. A binder had been produced. A woman in a bathrobe had been civilly mattered. By the next day, I was no longer Mark. I was that trapeze guy, or the net king, or my personal favorite, Cirque du Mark. The neighborhood's reaction was interesting. Brenda, it turned out, was not popular. She had, in her short, beige-tinted reign, cited Gary for non-conforming seasonal gourds. It was a Halloween pumpkin. And fined the nice old lady on the corner for her excessively colored rose bushes. The net became a symbol, a big, blue, bouncy symbol of freedom. Brenda, to her credit, tried one last gambit. She called an emergency meeting of the HOA board to discuss an immediate amendment to Article 7. Nobody came. Stan and Mort, her loyal I-men, had suddenly gone on a fishing trip. Together. They sent a joint postcard from a lake I'm pretty sure doesn't exist. Brenda had lost the room. She was a president with no power, a queen with no subjects. The net, meanwhile, became a community feature. The neighborhood kids, who at first had been terrified of it, were now endlessly fascinated. I'd come out to find them just staring. Finally, I made a command decision. I bought a pack of rules for the net and laminated them. The net rules, aka Cirque du Mark. No shoes. Ever. No more than 4 kids at a time. No extreme bouncing. This isn't Thunderdome. If you break my book or spill my beer, you are banned. For life. It became the new cool spot. I was the king of the block. I'd sit up there, reading, while 3 or 4 neighborhood kids lay around, reading comics or playing on their phones. It was, accidentally, the most social I'd been in years. Sarah watched me one afternoon, holding court from my 10-foot-high nylon throne. "You know," she called up, "you did all this out of pure, concentrated, 200-proof spite." "And your point is?" I said. "My point is," she said, laughing, "you accidentally became the fun dad of the entire block. You've actually created a community gathering spot by being the most antisocial, spiteful person I've ever met." "I'm a man of the people, darling," I called down. "The people just needed a 10-foot-high blue net to see it." A week passed. A glorious, peaceful week. I spent at least 4 hours a day in the net. My back had never felt better. My tan was coming in nicely. Brenda, however, was still watching. Her curtains still twitched. She hadn't given up. She was just waiting. Waiting for me to make a mistake. Waiting for a cable to snap. Waiting for the bylaws to magically rewrite themselves in her favor. I felt bad. No, that's not right. I felt like the job wasn't quite finished. There was one last I to dot. One last T to cross. On Friday, Stig's truck reappeared. Just a small visit this time. For maintenance. And a minor addition. Brenda, of course, was at her window in a flash. She watched as Stig and I stood on my 2nd-story balcony, the one connected to our bedroom. She watched as he installed a thing. It was a small, professionally installed transit line. Sarah was standing at the bedroom's French doors, filming again. "Mark," she said, her voice full of that beautiful, "I love you, you are an idiot" tone. This is too much." "Nonsense," I said, clipping my new athletic-grade harness to the pulley. "It's not too much. It's efficient. Think of the time I'll save not using the rope ladder. It's an elevated transit solution." I stood on the railing of my balcony. Across the yard, the net waited, a beautiful blue nylon bouncy landing pad. "Hold my beer," I said to Sarah. "You're not even drinking a beer!" "It's the principle," I yelled. I took a deep breath. I looked across the street. Brenda's face was a perfect pale oval of horror behind her window. I let out a "Yee-haw!" That was probably in violation of some noise ordinance, and I jumped. For 2 glorious seconds, I was airborne. I glided majestically across my backyard on a 40-foot custom-installed zip line. I sailed over the lawn, over the sad patch of grass where the hammock used to be, and landed with a satisfying boing in the dead center of the net. I unclipped my harness. I lay back. I put my sunglasses on. I heard, very clearly, a window slam shut across the street. The curtain wasn't twitching anymore. I think Brenda finally gave up. I took a deep breath, the sun warming my face, the blue net gently cradling me. It was, I had to admit, far more relaxing than any hammock. After all, victory is the softest pillow.